Hey everyone, welcome to Beyond the Current Situation with me, your host, Lily Sanders. Hey, it's now. Wow, we're up to season 6, and I'm super excited to bring on my new guests for this season. I'm going to bring them on one at a time. The first one is Anne Marie Romer. She's an author. She's an author of her powerful book called Just Give Me the Road, and she's a columnist for the Dayton Daily News and a community activist for suicide awareness, which I was unaware of that up until the time that I had invited her to come on the show. I was unaware that she was a suicide awareness activist. So super excited to unpack that a little bit. Her essays, they can be found on her blog, AnneMarieRomer.com. Of course, I'm going to put all these contacts and links on the show notes. And she writes about the joys and she writes about the sorrows that connect all of us. And she's a retired nurse and a mother of 4. Perhaps most important, she's the grandmother of 9 and counting. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that journey as a grandmother. And so, without further ado, right now she does still reside in Ohio with her husband, Mark. And I'm just going to bring her right in and we're going to dive right in. I'm going to ask her a couple of questions. Uh, and thank you for being on Beyond the Current Situation. Hey, Anne, thank you for being on Beyond the
Thank
Current Situation. I'm going to have to dive right in and ask you, what was this your first book that you wrote?
Yes, it's my first book. Yeah.
Amazing. And what prompted you? I mean, did you wake up and say, "Hey, I'm going to write a book"? Is this something you've wanted to do all your life? I knew that I had a motivation when I wrote my first book, Truth to Triumph. So, um, how did your book come about?
Well, my book came about because of my nephew Connor's accident. And I think you've
Yes,
done.
who we've had on the show. So
Yeah.
for those of you that are tuning in for the first time, go ahead and actually subscribe so that you are privy to all the new episodes that are coming out. But previous to this, in the last season, I actually did a series that was wrapped around Anne Marie Romer's book. Well, not wrapped around her book, because I don't really know much about your book, but it was wrapped around her nephew, Connor. And so I did a 4-part series that's wrapped around Connor Crippen and his experience. So I just wanted to unpack that for our listeners. Okay, so something happened to your nephew, Connor.
Mhm. Something happened, very traumatic brain injury. So and my sister and I are very close. And so I felt helpless when Connor was recovering from his accident. And so, in a kind of a backdoor way to help my sister, I kind of kept a daily Facebook blog about his recovery. And I think what I tried to do in that daily blog was to find something positive to write about as Connor is laying there in a coma or he can't hold his head up or whatever. My blog on Facebook went viral, and we had thousands of people interacting with us, also sharing their stories, trying to find the good in, because everybody's got trauma. Everybody has something that they have to really try to work through. And so that theme of finding good and finding hope, even when the world is falling apart around you, is a message that I thought worth sharing beyond this Facebook blog. So
I'm going to pause you right there. Was that your theme of the book, of your blogging? I mean, hope, and what was the theme?
The theme is finding good in the awfulness.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, my sister and I have, our family has been through a lot. I'm sure we'll get to this, but we had two brothers we lost to suicide. And my sister and I, in tandem, along with our other brother, Jerry, took care of our mom for years. So we were used to trying to navigate adversity. So yes, the book is actually a love letter to my sister in a way, and it's also just highlighting the ways in which we found hope every day, and joy and laughter, and when life is really hard, you know, and it's been hard for us from time to time. So that's the theme of the book.
I love that. A love letter to your sister. Is your sister, and we're going to bring her on soon. Is she your older sister, younger sister?
I'm older.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's your baby sister, basically, and you're very close. This is like a love letter to your sister. Now, as the oldest sibling, or should I say, as the oldest sister,
Yes.
tell me about your other two siblings, your brothers who
Well,
committed suicide.
mm,
What, um, how old were they when you experienced that?
well, our oldest brother, Pat, was 30 years old. He had suffered from some diagnosed mental illness for a number of years. And so we always kind of, he was the sweetest and most sensitive and loveliest man, but he just struggled with life. He had bipolar disorder. And this was how many years ago? 38 years ago or so. And so, yeah, so he took his life. And, you know, that kind of just rocked our world. So then there were four of us left. I am the oldest girl. So there's three boys, and then me, and then Kathy. And so after Pat died, the remaining four, you know, became super, super close. And we vowed never to let this happen again. We constantly were checking in with each other. Our second brother, Neil, just he took his life. It'll be 10 years in June, I think.
Wow, just
And
10 years ago.
he was 57 years old. And his kind of his he just had kind of a drip, drip, drip of soul crushing that happened over a number of years. But boy, were we really blindsided by that.
What, you know, I'm going to pause you there. If I can ask you, so Neil, it's only been 10 years, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to go back to Pat, but it's only been 10 years with Neil.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you were blindsided.
Yeah.
Wow. Which, look, everyone that is listening and watching right now, and everyone in this room right now, you, me, Kathleen, we can all relate. We all either know someone that has had suicide in their family or loved ones, or we personally have experienced suicide with our family or loved ones, right? And so, more often than not, even as a coach, what I notice is that many people are blindsided. And it's really no different than like with me, and I could laugh about it now, but even with domestic violence, people were blindsided. They were like, what? Like, you've got to be kidding me, right? Like, nobody knew. And so I know that even as a survivor of domestic violence, I was really, really good at hiding it. And so I'm finding this common denominator, if you will, or this common thread in people that do wind up succumbing to taking their own life, their
Mm.
bodily life. And we'll get to that. many times uh, it comes as a surprise to their loved ones. What was that like for you at that moment, only 10 years ago, you personally losing your brother at 57 years old?
Well, it still blindsides me because, Neil knew the heartache of suicide. He knew the just the heartache of it all. And he was, I think, of all of us, he was most deeply affected by Pat's death. And so to get to a point where you could then even consider taking your own life, knowing firsthand the heartache of losing someone you love so much, it still blows my mind. But it just goes to show the amount of pain he must have been in. And so I can't relate to that because I'm not wired that way, but I have deep, deep respect for those people that are, because I think once you get into that abyss of darkness, it's like there's no way out for you, So
Yeah. It's interesting you say, that he knew. I guess my question is, what did you know from the suicide of Pat?
oh dear, what did I know? Well, when Pat died, I was 23 years old. I was newly married. Kathy can speak much more to, she and Pat had a very deep and tender and loving relationship. I wasn't as close to him as much. I mean, of course it was heartbreaking. He left a son. And it totally discombobulated our entire kind of trust in our family unit, our trust in life. I mean, I don't know. It was
Yeah.
it was terrible loss. It
Yeah.
just still is. Still
Yeah.
is.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not as much anymore, 10 being it feels the same. Has that pain changed on that level at all?
It's interesting you asked that because just even the last few days, maybe it's the change in the weather, the change in the season, but I find myself missing them, and especially Neil, so much more. I mean, the ache never goes away. And the bigger life gets, the more experiences we have, the more milestones in our lives, the void of him and Pat not being here, still, it's scale 1 to 10. I mean, I don't know. I can't even put a number on it. It's just this void that's always there and it never goes away. And I find it, I'm feeling it a little bit more lately, actually. So,
Do you think it's because of where you're at in your season at your age, and where you think, like, where you're thinking like he would have been at?
yeah, I mean, Kathy and our other brother, Jerry, and I, we have lunch every once in a while. And my brother, who's newly retired, was saying that he misses Neil so much more now, if that's the right word, because he's now retired and he thinks about all the fun he would have had golfing and meeting for lunch and with Neil. And, perhaps because maybe there's more space in my life right now,
Yeah.
that I can miss him,
Yeah, it's like human condition, like when we have more time on our hands, albeit whether it's retirement or what have you, we have a lot more time to also go into our thoughts and our mind, and right.
Yeah.
It's true. I'm going to pause you there for a moment, and I'm going to bring on your sister Kathleen, Kathleen, before I bring you on, you can, I'm going to introduce you and tell people who you are to me, and then who you are to all of us. To me, you are the strong leader and mom of my new friend, your son, Connor Crippen, right? Who was on my podcast last season. And so you're also the sister of Anne Romer, who wrote this amazing book, Just Give Me the Road. So just to give everyone just unpack an introduction of even more than that to on Kathleen Crippen. She's a retired elementary school teacher. And during her long and successful career, Kathleen had worked to unlock each student's potential for learning and success, which to me is really no surprise because maybe unknowingly to her, it seems that since I've been on a little bit of the story and the journey in their lives with what happened to her son, it seems that she just continued on that path of helping people really reach their potential. And since her son, Connor, speaking of Connor, suffered a severe traumatic brain injury 10 years ago, Kathleen has become a staunch advocate for alternative therapies to maximize the brain's capacity to heal, which I am in complete support of. We even discussed that within the podcast that we had together with her and her husband, Phil. So, of course, Kathleen's a mother of 3. She has 2 grandchildren. And she's been married to her husband, Phil, who I've had here on the show, another major leader and force for good in the family. And they've been married for 35 years. They also live in Ohio. And I'm going to bring you on, Kathleen. Thank you for being here.
Good to be back with you, Lily. So good.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you, let's go back. Let's go back to your brother, Pat, who Anne said you were close with. How many years apart are you and Pat?
Yeah, we were 13 years apart.
Okay.
Pat was the oldest. I was the youngest.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, that's very common for that young sibling to be really close with the oldest sibling like that. From your age, let's see, that means that you were about 23 when he passed? No, 13?
Yeah, that's some pretty good math.
Yeah.
I was actually I was 18. It was a month away from my 18th birthday.
Okay, so 18. And walk us through what happened when you discovered that Pat had taken his life.
Well, we knew it was a bit of a crisis time for him. We knew his bipolar or / depression or whatever you want to call it was in crisis mode, and he had been missing for a few days. We just didn't know where he was. And I remember my mom and I sitting at the kitchen table calling hospitals. He lived in New Orleans at the time. He had just moved down there a few months before. So we were worried. And then it's interesting, I was a senior in high school and got called over the PA to come to the office. And I walked into the principal's office, and there was my sister and Mark, her husband, just to deliver the news. And then subsequently Neil came also to my high school. We didn't have cell phones at the time, so I'm sure nobody knew what anybody was doing, or, so yeah. And then, we all gathered, and, my dad was in those early years, just not very present. And so Pat was my protector. He was my father figure, so to speak. We did always just have a very tender and special relationship. And yeah, it was horrific.
Oh my goodness. I think I would be remiss to not say what I was thinking of at the moment. Not thinking, but what I was feeling when you just told that story. And I don't know, maybe I'm going crazy, but did that seem like a flashback for you for when you called, when like your son, when that happened to Connor, when he had that accident and you got that phone call? And then now, like a flashback of your son who was just also in junior high or high school that had to actually deal with that life situation with his brother?
Well, I mean, I didn't think about that specifically that way, but I even think I mentioned to you I had a whole lot of training. We all had
Yes.
a whole lot of training for a horrific phone call. I mean, and there was another phone call with Neil, that just rocks your world and earthquakes it to a different path.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's unfortunate, but we have gotten many of those phone calls, and
Yeah.
that heartache. Yeah.
Gosh. Was Pat the first part of your training?
Yes, I believe so.
That was like the first big traumatic
Yeah,
event, family event.
absolutely.
And
For all of us. Yeah.
yes, of course. Of course. Um, do you recall Neil's reaction to that event?
Yes, my sister is right. Neil and Pat were only 2 years apart. Um, and Pat had suffered with his mental illness for many years. And, we all had different roles in that. I was pretty young, so I wasn't necessarily in the thick of it, but Neil and Jerry definitely were in the thick of it throughout his whole journey. And some of it was intense crisis time. So gosh, I already forgot your question, Lily. Where am I going with this?
Oh, yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah.
That's because we're in the moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just wondering if that seemed like a flashback. Oh no, we were talking about training. Was that your first training event, basically?
Yes.
And then I had asked you what Neil's immediate
Oh, right.
reaction was.
Yeah. And so he was crushed to the very core.
Oh my goodness.
And just, I think at that moment, because it was the first, catastrophe that we all entered into as a family, obviously we all approached it, all dealt with it, all internalized it. Although we're all very close, but we all did that differently based on our personality, based on our maybe faith, based on the trust, of life. And I would say that Neil he just never forgave Pat. He never found a space that he could live with it. And I think the older he got, the harder it became. And maybe it goes back to what you're saying. He had more time, or, the ups and downs of life, and you want to share that, with your sibling. So it probably was a scar for a long time. And then the older he got, it became a gushing wound.
Yeah.
And I can't really explain that. That is not how I think it settled within me or my sister or our brother Jerry. But it did settle, and it never went away for him. And it's very sad.
It is very sad. You know, it's interesting, your choice of words. What you were thinking is that he never forgave Pat. And one of the things that I find that no one's ever talking about, I don't see it anyway, in when it comes to suicide awareness. And obviously I'm going to have you speak to that. And, you know, there's all of these myths, right? I bust myths all the time. And isn't it entirely possible that that one myth out there, that one common myth on suicide is the response that I always see more often than not in bystanders and in family members and friends is that horrific response, oh, how selfish.
Mm-hmm.
And it really disturbs me when it just disturbs me.
Yeah.
And if I were to reframe that, that Neil possibly that he never forgave Pat, I'm wondering if it's, and of course we this is only an afterthought, but I'm hoping that maybe to hear your expert opinion on it as someone who lived it with siblings multiple times, if this can help any other people that are in it now. And what I'm wondering is it sometimes that we feel like believing that myth that it's selfish, or we get angry at someone that takes their life and we hold on to that? I feel like, isn't it entirely possible that it eats and eats and eats away at you instead of reframing it and maybe seeing that maybe we need to forgive ourselves for even blaming that person that took their life, and maybe that would maybe heal us and bring us into a different space. I don't know if this any of this is making sense, but I feel like that myth bleeds onto other people that are close to that person that took their life, and almost has them considered taking their life. It's like almost like this cycle. And I can only blame the common language around suicide, which is so, it's pathetic that people would respond, to about someone's death saying that they were selfish.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with you, because that kind of makes it more about myself than it does about the person who was suffering.
Yeah, in like a discompassionate, non-empathetic way.
Yeah. There's an anger there, and I understand someone having anger. How could they cheat me out of our relationship? I mean, I completely understand all the feelings that can come with having a loved one taking their life.
Of course, especially if they have children and a spouse. And
yeah, I think ultimately, I know with Pat, we watched him suffer for so long, and my sister alluded to it. My visual of him is a beautiful flower in the middle of winter. So when you watch someone go through such depths of despair, it was so obvious he was not thinking about, he couldn't think about anybody else. He had to just, live his, it was too awful for him. The winter was too hard for that beautiful, sweet flower. I think the difference is we didn't see Neil suffer through this mental despair. If he was the life of the party, he was, he was such a family person. He cared deeply about his family. There was nothing that we, could pinpoint. It truly was out of the blue. It truly was out of the blue.
That's such a it's such a mystery, right? And so you almost had actually no training for that one, because so now you have training for someone who was suffering, that everyone kind of did have a handle around what was going on with Pat, and then all of a sudden, all of these years later, is your other brother who you were totally blindsided, all of you, because he did not show any signs of suffering. Is that right?
No, that's right. That's
So,
right.
so how did you deal with that?
Well, I think you just, at least from my point of view, you will never find the answers to so many things in life. You can spend your days and nights thinking, why?
Mhm.
And it just will never come. And
Is that the common question, by the way, when you lose a loved one through suicide? Why?
I think it's the common question whenever there's a tragedy. I could ask, why did that drunk driver hit Connor? Why,
Such a good point.
did
Yeah.
my mom, she had such a life as well with many tragedies. I think
Mhm.
with anything that comes upon you, it's very natural to say, why me? Why is this happening? Why did he take his life? Why didn't I know?
Mhm.
What could I have done to stop it? All of that. And I just think it's knocking your head against the wall over and over and over again. You're just never, ever going to get what you need,
Mm.
what you think you need to
So
make
what
sense of it.
then what is it that helped you understand that, to stop knocking your head against the wall and stop asking why? What did you replace with that curiosity or that need to know? What did you replace with it that worked for you?
Um, that's a good question. Some kind of trust in this life, in this process. Some kind of uh, realization that I wasn't going to just continue to live in the pain. And so, I think I just chose to love these people and to love them in spite of leaving us. And, you know, I don't, just not dwell on what was so painful and so horrible.
Yeah, you said a powerful couple of powerful things. When it comes to pain, right, it's inevitable. We're all going to experience something that brings us pain, right? Otherwise we
Yeah.
wouldn't be on this earth having this
Yeah.
human life, right? And for me, and I also I talk about this in length in my book, it's really what we do with that pain, so that we have that choice. We can decide to let it spin us into suffering, or
Yeah.
we can leverage that pain, right, to take us to, yeah, in such a sad experience like this. I
Yeah.
forgive me for using the word greater space, but really we can use that to leverage us into our higher self, a higher place of living and spiritual growth and human growth. Does that
Yeah.
make any sense? Do you agree
I
with
mean,
that?
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And so then fast forward, what happened to mom?
Oh gosh. My mom grew up in New York City. She was given up for adoption from two people that just had come over from Ireland. And
That's exciting.
I mean, it is. And then she was, I mean, talk about a book. She was adopted by my grandparents. And my grandfather was a complete self-made man and had a roofing company in New York City that he built from scratch. And soon to become the best and biggest roofing company in New York City. They actually put the roof on the old Yankee Stadium. So he was a very, very much a self-made man. My grandmother, also grew up very, poor, and then entered into this socialite life, but was not always loving to my mom. Maybe even could be emotionally abusive. My mom was sent away to a convent for her schooling from the age of 7 to 18. So it was ultimately the nuns who raised her.
Oh boy.
Yeah, she had a very loving, fond feeling for all the nuns that raised her, even, in their strict, ways. But yeah, and so my mom never really grew up with much love in her life. And then she has, the five, and married my father out of necessity kind of thing. And then had the five of us. And if you will ask any of us, our first description of my mom would be the most loving, nurturing, beautiful, caring woman. So she somehow, in spite of her early days, was all about love. And my sister and I, we were, the youngest out of the five of us. And, the three of us were definitely a team for a long time, to move through all the pain of losing Pat. My dad was back in New York at the time. So, it's a whole big, it's a whole big generational in our DNA, all the events that have taken place,
So now there's you and Jerry and Anne, your mom and dad, right?
They've both passed. Our parents have passed.
Right. But before your mom passed, who passed first, your mom or your dad?
So our mom passed in February, and then Neil took his life in June.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So that I'm trying to get the order in my head. Oh.
Yeah. And our dad was still here until 2020. That's when he passed away.
Okay. So recently.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. And then Connor's accident. So Neil passed away in June, and then Connor's accident was the following March. So it was boom, boom, boom of just, losing our mom. I remember after the funeral, she had, we were able to hold a bedside vigil with her for a week before she passed, which was probably one of the most special times, I think, probably we all felt, all four of us, and our spouses. And I remember thinking when she passed away, this is not a tragic loss. This is a natural loss. Our mom, she was 80 years old. She had loved us to the very core and given us all the tools, that we really needed to live a healthy, happy life. But little did we know that losing our mom was for Neil, it was losing his anchor in life. And I think
Mm.
when she passed away, his compass kind of went askew.
Wow, that's a mouthful. So for any of you that are logging in late, let me put this in order even for myself. So first we have Anne and Kathleen's brother, Pat, who suffered mentally, diagnosed with bipolar, whatever mental disorder. And they all dealt with it in their own ways. And at the age of 30, he ends his life by suicide. Then years later, your mom dies before Neil.
Mm-hmm.
Their mom dies of what seems to be natural causes.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after that, the other brother dies of suicide, like the younger brother, but they were blindsided because he was the life of the party and there were no signs, zero evidence of him ever being mentally unstable. I'm not even sure how to put that, but no signs that he was going to take his life. And he lost his anchor, you said. Was his anchor mom?
I think so. He was, he was going through divorce at the time, and my mom was the anchor of our family for
Got it.
sure, for
Okay.
all of us. And so, yeah, I think he never would have done that, had that decision while my mom was alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know,
How many years
don't think
apart?
I don't think it's a coincidence that it happened shortly after our mom passed away.
Right, right. A lot of times we see like someone that's older, when their cat dies, they die, right? When their dog dies, they die. They just kind of give up. But how many years apart are you and Anne?
We're 6 years apart.
Okay. So I want to ask Anne a question. And as the older sister, I'd like to know your perspective. Did did you ever wonder if your mom died of a broken heart?
I think part of my mom's heart, you mean in the aftermath of Pat's death, carrying that with her?
Yes.
I think part of her heart was always broken. But how could it not be?
Mm-hmm.
Lose a child in any way, but in that way.
Mm-hmm.
However, like Kathy sort of alluded to, my mom, she was incredibly love forward, and she always had a cup half full, and she always found joy in something. I mean, I think and so I don't think she died of a broken heart. I think she learned to live with the brokenness of losing her child. But she just, Kathy and I and Jerry, we talk about this all the time. The example of how to live amidst disappointment and adversity, how to live within that joyfully, was my mom's MO. I mean, she was incredible. Yeah.
Wow. It's so amazing because I feel like I'm like this this person listening in on your life experience between all of you, and that whole journey of one tragic death and incident after the other. And it seems to me that your mom has really taught you and Kathleen and Jerry resilience in a way that you can really only define as acceptance and love.
Totally. I mean, I think looking back at my mom's life, it was sort of, she had one longing after another.
Mm-hmm.
She longed for love, and she never really had that with my dad. She longed for just more ease in life, and she never really had that. She longed as a child to be loved by her mom, and that kind of didn't happen either. So within her longing, constant longing, I think, she found abundance, and we say too that
Beautiful.
she created a dynasty of love coming from a place where there really wasn't any.
Yeah, it was like her legacy.
I know. And if you talk to even her grandchildren, I mean, our mom's been gone for 11 years now. If you talk to her grandchildren that know her, our children, my mom still lives in their daily walk.
Really?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Every time, if they are going through a difficult time in their lives, they always pull the examples of Jeej. They called her Jeej,
Jeez.
Yeah.
Your children and your grandchildren?
Well, even my grandchildren, because they are learning about her through my children,
Yeah.
My oldest daughter knew my mom. She spent a lot of time with my mom, and her children, whenever they see a butterfly now, oh, there's Jeej, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So honestly, the presence of my mom continues. And I think that's why, then when Connor had his accident, and we were all like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, like how much more can happen?
How are you kidding me?
Right. Who did you pose that question to, by the way?
Who posed that question to me?
Who did you pose it to?
Well, it was a natural question to God.
Yeah.
Like,
thank you for being transparent, because we all go there.
well, I
We
mean,
were like, really? How much more can you give me? How much more can you send my way? We've all done it. I've done it. Yeah.
and not only that, to have this thrust upon my sister, this,
Yes.
as close as we are, and we've done life in tandem, when this accident hit, there was no more tandem. I mean, I adore Connor. Our kids are kind of very close and interchangeable, but this was her son, and Phil too, for that matter.
Right.
So I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I had one thing after the other in my life, and I remember reaching out to someone, texting someone. This was before we had the easy text. You had to do every single letter to send a text with those old flip phones. And I remember someone saying to me, God doesn't give you any more than you can handle. And I'm like, oh, really? I'm like, yes, he did. Yes, he does. And then when it got even worse, I reached out to my very best friend, who's my butterfly. She was amongst one thing after the other incident in my life and died instantly. Felicia, riding her bicycle. And I'll never forget. And I still have that old phone with her text. She's only here in spirit today. And I said, God gave me more than I can handle. And she said, how can I help?
Ugh.
And those 4 words, Anne, it's no wonder why she was my best friend in the whole entire world. Those 4 words just brought my heart racing all the way up to my chin, just brought it way down. Just those 4 words, how can I help? Because she validated that it was just too much more than I can handle, because maybe I would have been suicidal, like it was just too much. So another myth bust. Yeah, you do get more than you can handle sometimes. That's why some people can't cope. Does that ring true? I don't know. From your perspective?
For sure. Yeah, and I'm sorry about your friend.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Feel I feel I feel your love for her.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And so
uh,
looked up, and when you said, okay, what more? Now this happened with Connor, and it's now you're not in tandem. This is Kathleen and Phil's son, and your children are interchangeable. Now what?
right. Well, some of those platitudes that you're talking about, God doesn't give you anything more than you can handle. God must love you very much. I mean, we could go through the list of things, but to me, that sort of those kind of quick quips, they circle the periphery of a life experience, as opposed to saying, how can I help? You go into it.
Right.
Like you go into it with that person that you care about. Or even if you don't care about them, you just kind of, it's a way of, let me be with you here. How can I be with you? So,
Or
yeah, I
you
don't.
do care, but you don't know how to handle it. So just saying, how can I help, is like the best thing in the world for someone.
It is, because you can't fix it. I mean,
Yeah.
that was certainly my frustration when Connor was going through his whole thing. And I literally sat next to my sister for whenever I could for months. My heart broke in places I never knew I had, because I couldn't fix it for her. I couldn't make it better. So all I could do was just sit there and write messages of hope and humor, and just to be there, so.
Mm. Did you have to, in order to do that, did you feel that you had to, and I don't want to put any words into your mouth, I'm just putting this out there. Did you feel that you had to put aside or compartmentalize your curiosity and possibly your anger of it all to actually be there for Kathleen and her family?
No question about it. In fact, I kind of became a shield of unwavering trust and hope that this would all be fine, because it was hard enough for Kathy to remain stalwart. She had to deal with fears and doctor reports and monitors and all this kind of stuff. So my job was to create this safe space around her that there could be no doubt. There could be no doubt. And actually, my husband, who's a physician, and he knew how sick Connor was. And he and Connor are very close too, but he knew that Connor was going to have a really hard time. And so that sort of created a friction between my husband, Mark, and me, because when I would come home, he would say to me, Anne, Connor's not going to, this is going to be hard. He's, you want him to go anyway. And I would say,
he's looking at it from a scientific lens.
Well, sure.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're anything like your sister, and I think that you guys are, you were looking at it far beyond what science tells you. And you're saying, no, I'm not having it. And you were looking at it from a spiritual lens that goes far beyond what any science can do.
For sure. And so sometimes that would create friction between my husband and I, because I'd be like, I don't want to hear it. So stop, And in the aftermath of losing Neil, we were so helpless in that loss. There was no way we were going to lose Connor. There was just no way. It was not going to happen.
Yeah. I don't know if you heard, I think you said you heard the episodes with the series that I did around Connor,
Yeah.
all 4 of them.
Mhm.
And I got to tell you, my conversation with Kathleen and Phil was so insightfully beautiful and eye-opening for every single parent on this earth. And if there's one thing that I will say is those 2 as a unit, they had more resilience than probably any couple that I know.
I would agree.
Mm.
That
You know,
makes-
not knowing them personally before we met on my podcast. And the other end of that is they too, here's what I'm seeing. They had no time to worry and stress and grieve over something of incident that happened, because they had to really put their energies into helping Connor elicit this healing and this transition and this change into, thank God, where he is today. And so when did you personally get to deal with recovering after the death of Neil before this happened with Connor? How did you fit that in, or did you?
Well, I guess we all fit it in. We all fit it. There was space to work through it until Connor's accident. And then,
But at 12 months.
well, yeah, it wasn't even. It was maybe 9 months or something.
Yeah. Did
But
you have time to heal Neil before going into the tragic incident with Connor?
I guess as much as you would think. I mean, I think loss like that, there's the different stages of loss, and there was shock for a long time. And then, crying, but then you just miss that person. But even during Connor's recovery, we missed Neil. I mean, I could just envision him walking in that hospital room and just saying the right things to my sister, and just, he wouldn't have stayed long, but he would have brought in his brand of hope and humor and love, and then he would have been right back out the door. That's the way he worked. So and once Connor had his accident, it was full stop.
Mm.
I mean, that was, and actually Neil's daughter Megan, who lived in Chicago at the time, I think it was very healing for her to be able to visit Kathy every day and be part of Connor's restoration, where there wasn't that chance with her dad.
Mm.
That makes sense. There was no chance to help restore Neil.
Those little hidden blessings, if you will, if you can call them blessings, that really, in my conversation just before you came into it again with Kathleen, I was mentioning how, we can do 2 things. We can either take that pain and fall into suffering, or we can leverage that pain into a higher self, a better, greater experience, right? A better space. And so it sounds like your niece was able to do that with the incident that happened with Connor. And, it's interesting because, statistically, they say after after a loss of a spouse or a loved one, of another human, not talking about animals, after 2 years, it takes a whole different light.
Mm-hmm.
And which I can understand, because the first couple of months, people are around, and you could feel everyone's warm wishes and condolences. And then people start to drop off. They're not around anymore. And then you start to distract your life. You distract yourself. In your case and Kathleen's case, you had a tragedy that was your distraction. God forbid that should happen to all of us, right? I mean, that's just a tragedy now distracted another tragedy, right? A loss. But for other people where there is just a more of a general distraction, and I'm not minimizing it, but after 2 years, that loss, that grieving, and that missing starts to come back into your life. So I'm wondering, I'm going to actually ask Kathleen, after now Connor has really regenerated his life and has come into this beautiful space of healing and being able to be in that survival mode on his own. He's doing wonderfully. In that aftermath now, do you also, like Anne, think about Neil a lot?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and maybe because it was interrupted so much with Connor's accident. Yes, in the quiet moments, you do. You just, the void is deep in missing him, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. There were no signs with Neil. And then one day he was gone. Do you ever, in your quiet time or in a moment where something is going on with the family, your children, your grandchildren, do you ever wonder if there's anyone in your family and your extended family now that could possibly be suffering from the same thing?
It's always a very little thing in the back of your mind. Sad to say, it's always, a possibility. But I think that for all of us here remaining, I think that we are healthy and strong. That doesn't mean there aren't moments or pockets of time or whatever. But, I mean, I don't worry about anybody right now.
Perfect. Wonderful. I was just curious. I don't really know, if that goes into your mind. Your sister Anne said she sees your mom. When I said your mom left quite a legacy of love, right, and resilience, and she speaks of it as her dynasty, like the dynasty of love that she's left. When you think about your brother Pat, who you were quite close to, what kind of legacy or dynasty do you think of with Pat that he has left with you and your family?
Well, his son, obviously, who is here and has children of his own. I think the other point of dynasty for Pat would just be his gentleness, his kindness, his very not really soft-spoken, but really his gentle way in life. And he loved big. And he in my very short 18 years, with my dad not around, he provided a lot of that security for me. So I think for me, his dynasty was that his protective love very much filled my cup.
That's
with not
beautiful.
having a dad around. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Now, fast forward all of these years later and all of these tragic losses later, here we are today. And you're here actually on this show with your sister, Anne. And she was with you, and she basically, her being that rock allowed you to do what you needed to do to help Connor and your family survive and pull through for Connor.
Mm-hmm.
What has that taught you about sisterhood?
I love that question. I don't think it taught me anything. I think it reinforced the power of sisterhood. The enormous, how enormous it is to have that woman sister sit by your side, that you can read any look. A doctor would come in and give us horrible news, and I would just have to look at my sister, and we both knew we were turning off our hearing. Or it was constant understanding, constant reading my thoughts, and constant presence. So it wasn't new to me throughout Connor, but in that situation, it reinforced and it exaggerated the importance of it. And, we talk about all these, very tragic things that have happened, but in this life, I have my sister. And that was, I think, part of the deal somewhere along the way. Is that you can have a bunch of really shitty things happen.
Oh, man.
But you have your sister who gets it all from the very beginning. And we laugh about things that probably shouldn't be laughed about, or, all the things. So it just reinforced and magnified. And, and luckily she and Phil, my husband, are a great team too, just like I feel like I am with Anne's husband, Mark. And so there is constant mutual respect and understanding. And, Phil was so happy that Anne was with me. Anne was so happy when, Phil was, doing his part. And so it was constant mutual love and respect. And, the joys of sisterhood are endless.
The joys of sisterhood are endless. Wow. Can I tell you, that is such a celebratory statement. And quite frankly, everything you just said is really such a celebration of life. And what you have is so rich. And your sisterhood, it's just, you want to talk about abundance. That is the epitome of abundance. It truly is. I want to thank you for that. And I'm going to ask the same question of you, Anne, but maybe in a little bit of a different way. I want to ask you, Anne, how important or how significant did all of these events create your sisterhood with Kathleen?
Ooh, I think from a very early age, well, let's listen. I remember the day my sister was born.
Oh, so cute.
And
because you were 6 years old.
I was 6 years old. I had three big brothers, right? And so I remember the day Kathy was born, and I remember feeling so happy. And so that companionship, and when you're a kid, 6 years is a big age difference, So I think in a way, I always felt a little protective of her when she was a little girl. But we have always been a unit, always, always, always been a unit. And so
Through thick and thin.
Through thick and thin, for sure. And we have always been pretty great partners. I mean, and we say that one of the reasons why we love our husbands so much is because they respect and embrace how close we are as sisters, you know.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I want to ask you about that because I was quite curious. How would you describe, Anne, the difference between your partnership and your intuitive closeness with Mark? What's the distinction with your sister, with sisterhood?
Well, I think with Kathy, you don't even need words. You know, I don't need words with my sister a lot of times.
Just a look, like Kathleen said.
A look or a sense, or for sure, a lot. We don't even have to say, we just have this kind of connection and understanding, you know. Mm-hmm. Sometimes with my husband, I need to spell it out a little bit sometimes, you know, which I think is probably normal or whatever, but yeah, I mean,
viewers, female listeners would understand that.
Yeah. My sister makes me laugh all the time. I mean, we really laugh hard together.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
That's so rich.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Laughter is super important.
Got to have a sense of humor in you got to find the humor in everything.
So, you know, I mean, there's just nothing like sisters. And I think some women don't have to be biological sisters to have that sort of connection. But I feel like, as Kathy just said, maybe that was part of the big plan that, okay, if you're going to be given this lot in life, I'm going to give you this partner. And so she's going to be, you know, makes me cry. She's going to be with you.
It makes me cry too.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
So having said that, and having really just underscored what Kathy said, what do you think about the big plan now?
Well, I sure as heck hope it's a little smooth sailing for a while. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we have learned is that no matter what, you know, we're gonna keep rowing the boat together, you know.
Mm-hmm. I had a funny thought as women. just a female thought, and in the spirit of, I'm going to say, sense of humor. Was there a time during the time where you were blogging and about what was going on with Connor, Kathy's son's experience, how it affected the whole family, Kathy, Phil, the siblings? During that time, was there a time that you can pick that you could find a little glimpse of a laughter or smile about something with Kathy?
Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think probably there were only a handful of days that we didn't find some levity somewhere.
Oh, wonderful. What's the one that pops out in your mind that you think is like the funniest?
Oh, I mean, I think there was probably, you know, a particular, you know, Connor had all kinds of caregivers coming in to the room. And so there was probably a doctor that was kind of struck us as funny. And, you know, when that doctor would come in and the clothes he was wearing, or, you know, his mannerisms would just strike us kind of funny. And the minute he'd walk out the door, we would look at each other and kind of chuckle. I mean, you know, I think that I can't remember a specific doctor, but I think that would have been something that we would have found levity.
Right.
You know,
Like you
going
didn't even have to discuss it. You both knew like, oh, this
out,
guy's just a
Or-
weirdo.
or if I could get her out of the room for a half hour and we go to the coffee shop, and there'd be something in the coffee shop that, I mean, that's just what we do. We just find levity.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
How about you, Kathy?
I actually was trying to think of a specific example. And I can't quite recall one, but it's just, it's just observing, and, you sitting there together, you observe the world in the same way. And so I remember there was a really grumpy, in the ICU, there was a really grumpy nurse who wouldn't let anybody in or out, or, she just was kind of ruling, the whole ICU, which of course she needed to and should have, but her grumpiness, we laughed about, or did impressions of later, in the day. I think wine definitely helps.
Okay.
For sure. But yeah, it
Yeah.
just
I mean, you were in a completely different zone. Not that your sister wasn't, but you were in the throes of this with your son and whatnot. And your sister, there she is trying to hold everything together as everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to work out. Let's go now now it's 10 years later today. What do you and Anne laugh about today?
oh my goodness. What don't we laugh about? We just have these inside jokes, we just have these, just these on the phone. We just call each other real quick to check on something. And then, I don't know, it's just the way we say it. It's our tone of voice. It's, yeah, I'm sorry I can't give you an exact example, but
No, that's fine. Do you ever feel that do any of you ever, like twins, do you ever answer each other's like finish each other's sentences?
all the time.
Yeah, I
When the
sense
four
that.
of us, when the four of us are together, yeah, all the time.
You
Yeah.
guys must be really funny if you go to like game night with other couples. You guys must be like a riot.
We are so fun to be with.
That's it. I'm coming to Ohio.
That's right.
That's great.
I mean, we really do. We just have a lot of fun together. And yeah, people do like to be around us because yeah. I have to say, in those early moments in the ICU with Connor, I mean, those were not days we were finding something funny to laugh about or whatever. Those were very scary days. And going back to I think this is kind of a neat thing, going back to my sister's book. She, Phil and I got there that night, and then my sister and Bridget and Jack came the next day, my other two kids. And I came down the elevator when we were there, and I saw my sister for the first time. I had talked to her quite a bit, but seeing her was much different. And we just, collapsed together in a hug. And I just looked at her and I said, I just give me the road. I can do anything if I have a road with Connor. I just need the road. And so that's the title of her book. Just give me the road.
Wow. Because I was
Yeah.
saying, wait, that's the title of her book. Just
Yeah.
give me the road.
Yeah.
And thank you for that. That's great. Now we know how that was entitled. And I want to ask you, with Just Give Me the Road, who gave her the road?
Who gave her the road? I think Grace gave her the road. I think I mean, Grace gave her the road, and I think
And then what road did Grace bring her to?
Grace allowed her to take one foot in front of the other. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, sorry. Well, real life, Lily, real life.
And no, that's okay. Um, so Grace took her to the road. So I'm going to ask you, Kathleen, what did you see on that road that Grace brought you to?
Well, I have to say, I think initially the trauma team gave us the road for sure.
Okay.
Gave us an actual chance.
And we all know that story, by the way. Everyone, you've got to go back to last season and listen to all 4 episodes to get that story. That it's a crazy story, and yeah, that trauma team, and you'll get to experience when you listen to those episodes when Phil and Kathleen first went to even visit the space where just the idea of and the concept and the suggestion of Connor going there, what that all looked like to them at the time and where that brought him. So the trauma team gave you the road, and then what did that road bring you to?
Well, it brought us to a very road with lots of blockades and lots of looking for different paths, I guess, if we keep with the analogy. It was a road of rehab. It was a road of survival. It was a road of bringing Connor back to life. I mean, it juxtaposed our life for all of us, especially all 5 of us. Our lives all took a different turn because of it. And so, I mean, I think Bridget and Jack, they're in their careers because of, Connor.
Mhm.
So, it just was finding, the right path to take on the road. I knew that if Connor survived that first week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I knew that we could figure it out together.
Mhm.
But it was so iffy as to his survival that I literally just needed a way.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah,
that could only happen with his survival.
right. And it's no wonder why you couldn't, there were no really humorous times during
Yeah.
that journey. I've got to tell you, I literally just had this conversation with a group of people early this morning, 7 a.m. this morning, about humor. And I shared that I really lost my smile and my humor. I lost all of my humor for years
Oh,
until after. And then the humor came back. And then people said, "Oh, Lily's back." And then I could laugh about really silly things, right?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and laugh about anything. So I get that, because we don't always allow ourselves to find humor because we're so focused on someone else's healing and getting to a higher place or a better place and all of that. I totally get that.
Yeah.
But one thing that is, I would say, is a common denominator in all of our adverse roads, and I'm sure Anne agrees, and dying to read the book, and it is that there's one thing that's always on that road that we can decide to follow and keep stepping toward. And for me, it's love.
Mm-hmm.
And I say this in my book, Truth to Triumph. I never would have triumphed over anything unless I really, 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 really saw the way home being love. And I say it multiple times. When I speak of home, I speak of love. When I speak of home, I speak of love. Still today, when I speak of home, I speak of love. What's your thoughts on that, Kathy?
1,000% agree. 1,000% agree. Because it's not only, it's with love comes the goodness in your heart and not the suspect or the pessimistic view.
Mm-hmm. And judgment, and even
and
judgment. Judgment's
right.
big, right? Yeah.
Right. So as scary as it was to come back home without a team, like I always had in the hospital, it was with love that there was trust that we would find a team. I wasn't going to sit down and wait for them to come knocking on our door.
Yeah.
But I knew I had to find it. But because of love and the goodness, I knew we could find it.
Yeah.
Find a way,
Mm-hmm.
continuing on the road. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I think when you say love, it's a way of living in
Mm-hmm.
love.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I might ask you what love is for you. Love is, it's quantum, right?
Yeah.
There's really no tangible or human conditioning experience. I will say this, and whether people believe it or not, doesn't make this not true. That's how confident
Yeah.
I am in this answer. Love is not an emotion.
Yeah.
It's not. Love is. You're either going to, and we are made up of everything about us. The essence of love is who we are. And when we come home to that, then we can start to really live and walk through even adversity with at least a sense of peace and knowing, right, that everything's going to be all right eventually, right? Even if tomorrow is not in 24 hours, maybe tomorrow is in 10 years, 5 years, 3 months, whatever that may be. And so for you, Anne, do you see love as that path as well?
Oh, no question about it. Love is it's a way of being. And I have to say, there is no one that walks a path of love better than my sister. I mean, and my kids all know this, and they've all experienced that path with her. My kids call her Atty, and so it's like Atty love or Atty time,
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, I mean, she's always, even before Connor's accident, before we lost Neil, even for all time, just part of her DNA is to just be, she exists in a glow of love. She just does.
I see that. I told her that even after we spoke, even after she was on my podcast.
And she has a heart that is so accepting and so open and so giving and generous. I mean, she's really a pretty great person.
She is. And we're talking about her like she's not in the room, right?
I know.
So funny. I have her on mute. She's on mute. So as we're giving.
Oh, so can I go on? Because she can't interrupt me.
Please, yes.
She'd cut me off right now, But the other thing I do have to say is her husband, Phil, is about, he is about as wonderful. He's almost as wonderful as my sister.
I know. I'm telling you, I told our mutual friend, John Michael, I said, yes, I have listened to my own podcast with Kathleen and Phil 3 times. That was a 2-hour-long podcast. I listened to it 3 times and I could not get over how authentically loving and selfless and generous those two are.
Yeah, they're great. I dedicated my book to Phil because
Oh, I can't imagine you wouldn't.
so much of the book was about sister and this and that. So I dedicated it to Phil because Phil was just, I mean, he's loved too,
I know.
he's my kid's favorite person in the world. And,
You're so blessed.
I'm telling you, he's their confirmation sponsor. He's their godfather. He's this and that. Anyway, he's great. So they're a pretty fabulous team.
Speaking of Phil and them as a team, I want to ask you a question. During the time when you were all going through this with Connor and you were journaling, obviously the journaling was very healing for you, but really, honestly, full transparency, Anne, when did you cry? When did you break down?
I only broke down one time.
Wow. How?
I was home here because I was in Chicago a lot. Phil and I tag team. And I was home and I was by myself. And I just sobbed. But I can remember doing that only one time.
What triggered it?
I think this was well into Connor's recovery. This wasn't like the day of or the day after,
like months later when he was at that home.
Yeah. Or even just weeks later or something. I think I was home. I think I was by myself. I think my heart was breaking for my sister. And I just sobbed. But then, I couldn't cry too much because I had to be there for her. And, I couldn't cry because,
because why?
I had to remain really strong for her.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had spent time crying, that would have been more burdensome for her.
Would it have been possible for you to spend time crying when you weren't around her at home every day?
But I was in a zone.
That's what worked for you, being in a zone.
Yeah, I think all of us were in a zone. All of us that love Connor and were intimately involved with his recovery were in a zone. So, and I'm not a crier. I don't cry a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So when I do cry, it's usually a huge purge, as opposed to my sister, she cries a lot, and that's part of her beauty.
Mm-hmm. So does Phil. Phil said he does too.
Oh yeah, they're both a mess. They just, sitting around Thanksgiving
She's
dinner.
Still on mute.
Sitting around Thanksgiving dinner, we go around the table and we all say what we're thankful for. And when it gets to be Kathy and Phil's turn, the rest of us are like, oh God, it's going to go on and on. They're just going to be crying.
That's so funny. We do that at Thanksgiving. That's wonderful. I love it. So then, okay. So you broke down once. You cried once, not in your sister's presence, nor in Nick, your husband's presence.
Correct.
Okay. I want to ask you, as an advocate for suicide awareness, which I had no idea that you were, what is it that your message is for those that either have experienced a loved one or a family member with suicide, or are possibly curious if someone in their life is thinking about suicide?
Well, I speak at local high schools. I have a presentation, and I love to speak to young people and share our story of loss. because I think the best hope to eradicate the epidemic of suicide is to reach people young before these seeds of despair are really sown deep within a gut or in your soul, you know. So my message to them always is, you know, just stay open, you know, stay open. Don't close yourself off to your pain, you know. These feelings of despair are much more common than you would think. So by talking about it, opening yourself up and not becoming isolated, then we can all help each other, you know.
So
Spaces.
stay open, know that it's more common than you think, speak out, speak up about it.
Right.
So
And
basically finding support somehow.
right.
Mhm.
Because I think the problem is when you start to feel alone.
Isolation is.
Isolation. Yeah. And then, you know, and then you start to tell yourself stories in your mind like, oh, nobody's going to really, everybody's going to be fine if I leave. The world would be better off if I'm gone, you know. And so that's when the kind of toxicity of isolation can take over, you know. So, and there is not a time that I don't speak to high schools that I'm not approached afterwards. And these young kids come up to me and say, you know, my dad took his life, or I've been feeling this way, or I'm so happy that you talked about this because of a variety of reasons. And so, you know, we just got to keep at it. We got to keep talking about it and trying to reach these young people. And I feel like, you know, if we can kind of, speaking of roads, if we can give them a detour where it's not going to fix their feelings of depression or isolation, but if they're on a different trajectory where they feel of a sense of belonging within that difficulty, then it's a win-win for everybody.
I couldn't agree more. Distraction is so underrated.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yes.
It is so underrated.
Mm-hmm.
That is the answer, an immediate answer to changing your state, no matter what's going on in your life. Right?
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether it's abuse or alcoholism or drug addiction or whatever, depression, suicide thoughts, distraction is a beautiful, beautiful way to change your state quickly.
Right. It's about distraction and space, I think.
Yeah.
If you open up your world or open up your breath even, that creates space that allows some goodness to seep in, you know, or just freshness, or you don't feel so closed in and suffocating.
Yeah, I think you said it right there, opening up your breath, because it's hard for someone that's in it to, okay, I'll open up my world. You know, they're not, but if they open up their breath and just start with the breath, which is really just suggesting or helping someone become present and just open up the breath, be present, right? And then take it from that breath and go to the next present moment and go to the next present moment. And it's interesting because, you know, there's always those people that are bashing, like, you know, anyone that's trying to help anyone elicit positive change in their life. You know, I always talk about being present and being in the present moment. And some people have said to me, yeah, well, even the present moment, you know, ends. And I'm like, yeah, that's the beauty of it, because everyone's moment's not great. You know, that's the beauty of being in the present moment, because even the moment ends. Would you agree with that, Kathleen?
Absolutely. And I love that. I love that. You know, this too shall pass. And, you know, just, you know, be in the moment. And yeah, for sure.
Yeah. If we didn't have each moment passing, we'd be living back in all the adversity that we've been talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. On that breath of fresh air, Kathleen, you already said it before, but if you were to kind of tie a bow around what you talked about with sisterhood and what sisterhood means to you, what would you say to sisters that are listening in on this that don't have the close relationship that they'd like to have with their sister?
It would make me sad for them. You know, sometimes it's not possible. So I don't want to, but if there's any little inkling of a desire to reconnect and rebuild, then I would say absolutely. It's like having a winning lottery ticket and you've buried it, so it's there. And all you really need to do is turn in that lottery ticket, to get your winnings. You need to try with your sister, because I believe women can find sisterhood among women. But if you have a built-in sister right there, it's a treasure. And I would hope, maybe even in listening to this, that, maybe a phone call, maybe a check-in, maybe a begin again, maybe a letting go of whatever it is that's bothersome. Just
Mhm.
begin again.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's too precious.
It's too precious. How about you, Anne?
Well, I agree with everything my sister just said, but also too, for those sisters that are estranged, there's so much shared. They share so much of the same life story that perhaps a place to begin to create a renewed sense of love for your sister is to just remember together what it was like, at the dinner table growing up, or remembering about the backyard, the swing set with the kooky slide or something, or remembering when you went to your grandmother's house, or just some of those shared experiences that you can't create those with anyone else but a sibling, because that's the foundation. And even if that was a broken foundation, it's still a common experience that perhaps you can share with different sets of eyes or ears. Are you muted?
There we go. Yes. Like, what if it was a broken foundation? Then would you compare that to, let's say, what you and Kathy had gone through with all your adversity? What if the sisters had a broken foundation with lots of adversity and no happy memories of childhood? Now, fast forward, it's their adult life. Now what? What would you suggest?
Well, who else could understand that?
I couldn't agree more.
Who else could really understand that? I think in some ways, Kathy and I had a little bit of a broken foundation growing up, which set there's a 6-year difference between us. So we didn't come into this world close. I mean, that was cultivated because.
Good point.
Yeah, it was cultivated over time, because we were this unit right from the get-go, and so I think especially when you have experienced adversity together, that just to me is such fertile ground for connection, and resilience, and as opposed to people that grew up without much adversity, smooth sailing. There's really no reason to be so needy of one another.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. So I think, we can talk about our adversities and whatever, but that's the reason why Kathy and I and Jerry, our brother, are so close, is because it's been kind of hard, and there's been many times where we've had to sit around a old scratch dining room table and try to figure out what to do next, and but that's where our bonding was created at such an early age. So for those siblings that don't feel like they're bonding with one another, they've bonded, it's just a matter of kind of recalling that and maybe looking at that through new eyes.
I couldn't agree more. That's such wisdom right there. So we should kind of look at that as, yeah, we did bond, and now it's almost like we forgot. So let's go back and renew it, or remember it, or reconnect with that, and see where we are today with that. Does that sound like good advice from you?
Yeah, and some people have hurt, that in those shared experiences there's hurt, but then maybe you're different people now than you were back then, and so maybe
Better people.
And better people. You sure hope so, I mean, you hope you get to be better through the years,
Yeah, I imagine we're all in the same age bracket, and after decades, let's hope that we're better people than we were. Even though we were good people then, let's hope we are so much gooder now.
Amen. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. I want to thank you ladies from the top of my heart to the bottom of my heart and all around it for being here and really speaking toward this. Can you tell us, we can also, I'm going to put this in the show notes, but tell us, where can we get your book, Anne?
Well, my book is on Amazon. Just Give Me the Road. And I just have to point out that on the cover of the book are two sisters. They're my grandchildren on the cover of the book.
Oh, how lovely.
Can I show this to you really quick?
I have it. Yeah. In fact,
here it is.
There you go.
Those are my granddaughters that are sisters. So anyway, you can get it on Amazon.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so it's a good story. It's a story. There's a lot of hope in there, and I love celebrating my sister and our sisterhood. And
I have to say, our niece, I unmuted, our niece, pull that up again, because it's your two grandchildren, but our niece created the cover. So Jerry's daughter created that.
Yeah.
So.
Put that up one more time and say the title of the book, Anne.
Just Give Me the Road. And there's two sisters walking down a road, just like my sister and I have for all time.
That's beautiful. So not only is it family in the picture, but your niece made that cover, and it's just, I celebrate the two of you so much and appreciate the two of you so much. And where can people support you with your advocacy on suicide awareness?
People can go to AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the resources as well.
Yes. There's also local Out of Darkness walks every fall, which bring to highlight just all issues related to suicide, and they're all over the country. So wherever you are, look for your community Out of the Darkness walk. It's just I used to be on the committee that organized that here in Dayton. And above all else, just don't be afraid to ask someone how they're really doing.
Oh, so insightful. And wait for the answer, and just be silent and listen, right? That is so insightful. Don't be afraid to ask someone how they are really doing. Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. The two of you, I'm really in awe of the two of you, and anyone listening to this. Let's all, including myself, let's just go and call our sister and just make that connection again. And I love you both, both of you. Thank you so much for being here on Beyond the Current Situation.
Yeah. Thank you, Lily, for having us. It's a joy. And Kath, I'll see you around 5.
Thanks, Lily. And whenever you're in Ohio, come to Toddy Time
Yeah,
with us.
come. Yeah, come. And
We'll
if
have
you're,
a great
if you're
glass
ever in
of
the
wine
area,
together.
we would love to see you. We'd have a
I
boat.
would love to do that. Yeah, Adam and I'll come by and I'll have him bring his saxophone. Connor would love that.
We love music. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, it's a date.
Thanks, Lily, so much for having us.
Bye, ladies.
Thank you, Lily.